second. We're going to live stream and we're going to call the meeting to order. Got it. Meeting is being live streamed. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first thing is on behalf of the board, we acknowledge that York Region is located on traditional territory of many indigenous peoples, including Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and the Métis peoples, and the treaty territories of Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and Williams Treaty First Nation. Today, this area is home to many diverse indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community. So members of the board, is there any disclosure of interest on any of the items at this time? Any disclosure? Not seeing any. Thank you. Confirmation of the public meetings, April 26th. Thanks, Muriel. Seconded by Walter. Questions on the minutes? All those in favor? Against? The motion's carried. You still got the meeting is being live streamed. Just put that on there. Okay, sure. Okay. Okay, there are no presentations. There are no deputations that I know of. And so we got the communications. There's two communications, both to receive. Is there questions on 7.1, 7.2? Questions on point 7.1 and 7.2? Going to ask Madeline and Steve to approve those recommendation. Is there any questions? All those in favor? Against? That motion is carried. Members of the board, you also seen that 8.1 is not on today. It will become at a later time. Okay, so we have we really have 8.1 and I'm going to go from the old 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5, but the chief would like to speak to a couple of them. So I'm going to do the forfeit offense related property proceeds of criminal crown law office. Is there questions on that one? I got it 8.2, but it could be 8.1 in the new one. Is there questions? Can I ask Linda and Norma to move that recommended board receive as information? Thank you. All those in favor? Against? That motion's carried. Okay, let me get this. 8.2, Chief, is the annual statistics report. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and through you, good afternoon to members of the board. Anitra, welcome aboard. Nice to see everyone. Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is for information, an annual report on our annual statistics for 2022. Brought a couple of folks from Strategic Services here to sort of walk you through a little bit of the stats and what that means for York Regional Police. So I will, in saying that, I'll turn it over to Inspector Tim Skinner from Strategic Services. Tim.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chief.
You just have to put your mic, get a little closer to your mic, bring your microphone a little closer.
How's that? Can everyone hear me?
Thank
okay?
you. That I can, but I'm not sure Linda or Norma can hear unless you're speaking right into the microphone. Oh,
Okay, I think
you
I'm
can hear.
seeing thumbs up. So
okay, good. Okay,
thank
go
you very
ahead.
much. Mr. Chairman, through you, it's my pleasure to go through the highlights of the 2022 annual statistics report. I would like to start by saying thank you to Mr. Swapan Das, our statistician, and our planning, research, and evaluation team for the excellent work they put into this very comprehensive report. To be clear, I am not the statistician who did all this mathematical work. I just get the privilege of presenting their work. Getting into the report itself, so total crime rate in 2022 increased by 15.8% over 2021, with the actual number of criminal and federal violations going up 16.9% to 45,713. Almost all areas of crime increased in 2022, but it's important to note that that's in comparison to 2021, which was a year impacted by COVID. So really, in most categories, if we look at what would be the trend line over 5 years, or even if we went back 10 years, the increases we're seeing in 2022 are kind of bringing us back up to where the trend line would have continued if COVID hadn't happened. So a lot of those increases are explainable by the decrease that we experienced in 2020 and 2021. Not so in all cases, but certainly in a majority of them. We get into specifically crimes against persons. We saw an increase of approximately 21% in the rate of crimes against persons. Significant increases took place in the areas of robbery and assault, those definitely trended above what we would have seen over a 5-year trend line. So we've overshot what the 5-year trend line would have been if COVID had not occurred. And furthermore, in the area of weapons offenses, we saw another significant increase in weapons offenses from 2021 to 2022, putting us over that anticipated 5-year trend line. In crimes against property, the overall rate increased approximately 16.3% for all crimes. Significant there was theft over 5,000, but most significantly within theft over 5,000 is vehicle crimes. Again, increased what significantly beyond what we would have anticipated the 5-year increase rate to be. In addition to the theft of vehicles, other crimes related to vehicles include an increase in fatal collisions and theft of gas. Moving into the area of hate crime, we saw a 42% increase in hate crime incidents, which again would put us over that 5-year trend line if we imagine that. Most motivation factors within our hate crime area were race at 54.2%, religion at 30.7%, and sexual orientation at 10.1%. Moving into clearance rates, we did see a drop overall in our clearance rate of approximately 4.8%, but it is important to note that the actual number of crimes cleared by York Regional Police was an increase. However, we saw a 9.7 increase in the amount of incidents. So even though we cleared more actual crimes, as a percentage of the overall reported crimes, it was a slightly smaller percentage with that decrease of 4.8%. Important to note as well that over the last year, we saw an increase in 1% in the population of the region, which contributes partially to that 10% increase in incidents. And from 2021 to 2022, we saw a decrease in actual strength for YRP of 31 members. So essentially more reports coming in, 31 less members doing the work. We still managed to clear more crimes, but we cleared more of a larger overall number. So still a slight decrease in the clearance rate. As far as clearance rate go, the chief's intention this year is to create a working group to look at other ways that we can examine that clearance rate and drops that have occurred there and ways that we can seek to increase our effectiveness on clearance rates going forward into the future. I think unless there's any other questions from anyone, that's the main highlights of the statistics report.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Questions?
thank you.
No. Yes, go ahead. You have to put your microphone on, just in front of your little push button. Thank you. Madeline, go ahead. You're good. No, there it is. You're on. Good.
Thank you, through you, Chairman. I did notice, and maybe some of the things you've expressed for the reason for the statistics would answer this, but I noticed that there was an increase in crime in certain areas like Georgina, Newmarket, and Vaughan. And I was just curious if there's a plan in place, or the chief has any kind of plan in combating that and finding a way to decrease, and why that particular area has that sort of increase.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, through you, Chair. These trends change from time to time. So when we do meet to show you some of the tools we have available to us to help in this regard, you're going to see a pretty robust business analytics program that we have to help us navigate what is going on in those areas. We work on a regular basis with the commanders in each of the districts to make sure that that we are focusing on trends in each of those districts, and that work will continue. So in terms of any specifics, I can't speak to one specific area, but as an example, you know, theft of vehicles is plaguing not only our region, but across the entire province for the most part, particularly in the GTA, right? So we'll continue to focus on trends like that. Residential break and enters, as an example, the trends generally spike in the fall and generally will fall somewhat in the spring and definitely in the summer when people are at home. So some of those trends will move from time to time. We anticipate those trends and try and put resources in place to address them. We have for the summer, Robertson, and I'm not sure, Deputy, if you want to speak to maybe the SET team or at least what's going on there and talk about violent crime, or at least what we do in that regard. Maybe I'll turn it over to Deputy Rouse.
Yes, thank you, Chief, and through you, Chair. Throughout the summer months, we do see an increase in certain types of disorder in the areas that you're talking about. Last year, we saw some issues around Canada Wonderland with the youth and the plazas across the street. So we have a crime abatement strategy, what we call an anti-violence strategy. So we have a team of 4 permanent members And this year they'll be augmented by 8 other members that is directed in those areas. The first weekend that Canada Wonderland opened this year, I'm sure you heard in the news, there were some other similar issues that occurred there. We have increased our presence in that area. And last weekend, there were no incidents to report of any significance in that area. They do have pay duties at Canada Wonderland as well. But as far as the crime report goes in those areas, we do have dedicated resources right across the south end that is directed at the areas where we see the spikes in crime, we call hotspots. And those resources are directed to abate the crimes in those areas.
And maybe lastly, I'll just say in relation to our data analytics, business intelligence, we have the ability and we'll demonstrate it and show it to you when we meet, to actually draw polygons around areas of, as the deputy reported, hotspots. And when we do that, it allows digitally for our officers to see when they're already in the car without even having a sergeant direct them where they should be focusing their time. And we can measure the time spent in those areas, the number of times they've addressed those complaints or those areas, to allow us to sort of direct patrols in the areas where they're required. And we can do that pretty robustly on a moment's notice. And that supports the investigations, the crime analyst in the district, and the overall crime strategy in the region. So that's how we sort of deal with those trends as they come and go.
Okay. I just
Sure.
had another question with regards to it seemed that the drug crimes were of all the crimes, drug crimes were down. So I was kind of surprised by that. And I was just curious if there's an explanation for it. Is it due to decriminalization? Is it due to something being categorized in another area? Perhaps it's under other kind of crimes rather than drug crimes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's a significant pick for this year, which has been different in the past, because in the past we've seen gun crimes and drug crimes go together, right? Up together. I don't have the answer for it. I do think that there has been less focus on drug crimes because of all of the guns we're finding on the streets by day to day, our officers that are doing patrols, routine patrols, and finding more and more guns on the street. But we are having a very frank conversation about internally about the need for more street level drug enforcement, because we know that does feed into other types of crimes, right? So it is a trend that we've noticed as well, that was different in this report than it has been in the past, and we have to work through it to determine why. But I think your assessment of legalization or whatever the case may be, I think it is taking on a life of its own to some extent, and whether it's at the policing perspective, the prosecution perspective, or whatever. And there is a national conversation going on around that. And we're part of that conversation through the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. Okay.
Thank you. Walter?
Two questions. The first one, how do these statistics compare to other communities in the GTA? Is this consistent? Is it anomalous?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you. As far as we're aware, they are consistent. We did reach out as recently as this week to speak to some of our counterparts across the province. And certainly the trends in violent crime, robbery, weapons offenses, theft of vehicles, that's a consistent trend across the province. Services are just releasing their statistics reports around this time. So Toronto's just came out today at lunchtime. Ours is being presented to you today. So that'll become clearer over the coming days as we see other reports. And then over the summer, we will get Statistics Canada report, which will show us if those trends extend nationally. But to our knowledge, yes, they do.
Follow-up question. Trends, as reflected in statistics, are a reflection of social change. Do your analytics give you the capacity to focus or look at causes? If this is going up, why? Because to be proactive versus reactive, that's an important consideration.
Do you want to take the business analytics piece? Deputy De Silva can answer that.
Go ahead, sir.
So through you, Chairman Emerson, our business analytics tool really focuses on the data that is generated by our officers. So there is, although we could apply data science, which is in the plan for 2023, to look at root causes of crime, but currently our analytical tool does not allow us to make the correlation at this point in time.
When is that likely to happen? And clearly, it's an important tool for you to understand and to prepare effectively. For again, trends are things that continue to grow, and they're important, and there are significant social changes throughout Canada. We've seen that particularly in the tragic issues related to the murder of policemen, but not just. You've identified a number of variables in which all of the trends have gone up. So again, I think it's critically important that these tools be used as aggressively as possible to help you understand those causes. Because I do not believe that you bear the burden of addressing all those causes, quite the contrary. The unfortunate thing is police services inherit all these things, but they're not all your problems. I mean, if there are other issues, poverty, drug use, etc., then there are other agencies that have to be brought into this response holistically, as opposed to, again, doing what unfortunately society has been inclined to do over many years, dump it all on you. That is unreasonable, and it is ineffective because it's not all on you, quite the contrary. You are part of the response cycle, but you are not the response cycle in totality, as unfortunately, increasingly society believes you are.
Chairman, through you. Thank you for Mr. Purchase for the comment and the question. I will say that I'm part of a national discussion right now on a lot of the issues that you're bringing forward: mental health, addiction, drugs, a lot of the issues that come about and cause people to intersect with policing, we don't control, right? And to your point, I can tell you, and the association of the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police has put out statements, as well as the Canadian Association, around the supports that are required so that the police can step back from having to respond to these types of issues. The reality of it really is, and we actually had this conversation a little while ago today, social service agencies can't work 8 to 4 and expect to support all of these issues, these social issues, social determinants of crime that the police have to pick the pieces up for. So while I'll agree, there will always be a place for us, subject to whatever changes are made provincially, nationally, with social agencies, to have them available at a time when they're required. And that is just not the case right now. The same idea of along the lines of drugs. When we talk about decriminalization, the statement across the country is no problem, but you better have supports in place to deal with the public health issue that's related to drugs. And if you're not, then we can't, how can we support that, right? Because we know what's going to happen. The police are going to be called again. We're going to be dealing with it. And then we won't even have the proper mechanisms in place to deal with it. So this is a national conversation supported by the OACP and CACP. And it has been for the last at least year that I'm aware of. So.
Final question. So is the association, which represents police officers across the province, is it moving towards engaging other stakeholders to develop a holistic approach? Because this situation is going to get worse across the spectrum. Again, and if society assumes that you are the cleanup agent for all things, clearly that's not going to work. It's not going to happen. So is there a dialogue that's now bringing in other agencies into this discussion, again, for the purposes of developing a more holistic and more comprehensive approach?
Short answer is yes. That conversation is already occurring with many of the agencies who we already work with, right? It's not a matter of them wanting to work together. It's a matter of having the business practices and the coordination amongst all services appropriately staffed at the time when they're required. So then when the police want to step away from an issue, we can. and the supports in place to help people. But I think we're in a good place in this region with the community safety and well-being plan, in that they're standing up a number of hubs in the region to assist with dealing with all of the social agencies and the police being just one stakeholder at the table. That is a move in the right direction, and we're part of that. We're part of all of those. So, okay.
Okay, I
Thank you.
have Norma, Linda, and Mary. Norma.
Thank you. My question is regarding hate crimes. Are there particular areas that you see the increase? And number one, and number two, are these prosecuted, and what's the rate of success in these prosecutions?
Thank you, Norma, and through you, Mr. Chair. Norma, the next report we're presenting is actually the hate crime annual report. Did you
Right.
want to wait until we go through that, and then we'll come back to that question if that works for you? Because we're going to present all of the hate crime stats to you. Deputy Hammond is going to walk us through that.
That's satisfactory. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Linda.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. It's not so much a question, it's just a comment. I don't know whether you want me just to give a quick comment now or to wait.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. I know you always like to take questions and comments. I was just trying to follow the rules.
I keep changing things around a little bit.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
All right. No, it's just to the comment that Deputy Rose made with respect to the incidents in Vaughan. Chairman, I think it's important to publicly acknowledge the team and Operation Beehive and what an effective job they did this past weekend at Norwood. But it's a little bit of whack-a-mole with that, because they're just moving around. I won't name the other locations publicly, but we all know where they are. And so I want to thank the whole team and behind Beehive. Very successful weekend. I kind of creeped it down there myself and had a look around, and it was very effective, very strong police presence. So Deputy Rose, if you could just thank your that whole team. And it was noticed, and actually even got an email from a resident who noticed it. So I know it's a moving target because they do move around, but I just want to congratulate your team for an effective this past week. And I know that you're going to do a great job all summer with that project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariel.
Yes, thank you. Maybe it's not a question, more an explanation for me to understand, or for others too. Crime guns is up. Most of the crime guns that I have seen reported, there's always drugs. I don't understand why the drug crime is down and yet the crime of guns are up. It seems they both come together, and it's confusing to me, very confusing.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Chairman, there's not a direct correlation that we're able to see at this point, other than not every weapons violation necessarily goes hand in hand with a drugs violation. Sometimes the weapons, it may be a fight that results in a stabbing. So now we have a weapons violation, but there were no drugs involved in it. So they're not necessarily tied together. I think you're right in that they commonly go together. The drug violation decrease is unusual. It's not, we wouldn't have anticipated that happening, and it's something that we'll need to watch. And somewhat addressing a previous question, what we like to do in these cases is go back to investigators who are working these crimes on a regular basis, see if they can offer some insight into why we see a drop. We go to other police services to see if they're experiencing a similar drop and if they have any reasons. And then our research team in planning, research, and evaluation can also go to academic literature and reach out to partners in academic institutions to see if there's anything there that would indicate the social reasons behind. So we have the data, but then what are the social reasons behind that as well? So I think the correlation between these two is strong, but not absolute. But they're certainly on the drug violation drop. There needs to be some further research.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands coming up. I'm going to ask Steve and Walter to move the recommendation is to receive. Now, Norma, we will deal with the hate crime next. So we'll go through the little bit of the presentation, then we'll go to your question at the end. But was there anything else you wanted to speak to the overall annual statistics report?
No, I'll just leave it for now. Thanks.
Thank you. All those in favor? Against, the motion's carried. So annual report on hate crime. Go ahead, chief.
Thank you, Chairman, through you. As you'd mentioned, this is an annual report that we bring each and every year. It falls under Deputy Hammond's purview, so I'll turn it over to the deputy and the team to walk you through that and then answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and through you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Used to saying good morning. As the chief has said, this is an annual report we do. I would like to introduce Inspector Colin Alexander. I'm going to give a brief overview of the report. He is the commander that oversees our hate crime and hate crime prevention units. So he's going to talk about a couple of things after I conclude. So this report does provide some statistical data about criminal and non-criminal offenses committed against persons and property, which are motivated by prejudice or bias. It also includes some strategies and prevention methods that we've employed to tackle hate crime and hate bias incidents. So by way of history, since 2005, Statistics Canada has collected data on hate crime from police services across the country. York Regional Police captures hate and bias incidents and hate crimes to ensure that the data is reported of the highest quality. So reporting really, we all know, is very crucial to identifying hate crime trends, to what you had said, Mr. Purcell, to really get ahead of some things. So identifying trends, hate crime groups, and any new and upcoming movements or ideologies that are of concerns that may impact community safety. So just to highlight a couple of the statistics, as Inspector Skinner has already touched on, there were 277 hate crime occurrences across the region compared in 2022, compared to 195 in 2021. Of those 277, there were 44 criminal charges laid. In terms of Ms. McCullough, your question around the success that we see for the prosecutions of those, many of them are before the courts. So I wouldn't be able to give you an answer in terms of whether there's conviction rates or not. I will, though, state that often these matters don't necessarily go to a trial. There's often an agreement made where there's a plea and a register finding of guilt, or the Crown may elect that there is insufficient evidence to go forward with the prosecution. So I wouldn't be able to give you the answer in that regard. We have seen an upsurge in mischief to property incidents, mostly in the form of graffiti throughout the region. These incidents are attributed to anti-Black, anti-Semitic, and anti-Islamic, as well as anti-Asian sentiments. So the chart that's in your package does highlight that in terms of race, the biggest increase are anti-Black racism, 94 occurrences this year versus 48 last year, and the South Asian community, so 10 versus 5 last year. By way of religion, so anti-Islamic and anti-Semitic hate and bias incidents have increased this year. And incrementally sexual orientation, we have seen some decreases with respect to disability, and there has been no change about hate against genders. For rationale, it's likely reflective of global events, which really include tension and conflict in the Middle East, the Ukraine-Russian war, resurging ongoing anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, pro-democracy movements, the residential schools inquiry, and more recently, the Iranian human rights struggles or the Iranian Revolution movement. So as well as immigration coming into the country. But what it's really important to impress upon all of you that this is not unique to York Region. Our policing partners are seeing the same increases across the province, and we have a network of specific hate crime and hate crime prevention officers across the province that meet very often to compare the stats and the trends so that they can get ahead of them. So it's not unique to York Regional Police. The current trend does indicate that we are seeing levels of intolerance to social injustice and discrimination. And many Canadians are becoming more educated about human rights, and thus they are more responsive to reporting hate crime and hate crime incidents. So that could be some rationale with respect to why the numbers are going up, because people are more comfortable reporting. And that's a strategy that Inspector Alexander will speak to, what we do to build bridges with the community so that they feel comfortable coming forward. Another potential contributing factor is the increase. It's really owed to the awareness brought through the strategies that encourages the reporting. Notably this year, our hate crime prevention unit has seen an increase in occurrences in the schools, both during supervised and unsupervised activities in the building. So in 2022, the statistics indicate that 23% of our total hate crime incidents are school related. So in 2021, there was a total of 20 hate crime occurrences in schools versus 64 in 2022. This increase really, it's anecdotal, but could be ascribed to the effect of being isolated during the COVID-19 pandemic, and really the influence of what youths are seeing or being exposed to on the internet and through social media. Lastly, my last point before I turn it over is about engagement. So our hate crime prevention unit incorporates the principles of policing with a global mindset and policing through the lens of human rights. So we have initiated several anti-hate campaigns to encourage the reporting of hate crimes across the region. And these campaigns include the anti-hate campaign with the Region of York, a partnership that we have through the municipal, the MDIG group. We've also provided some training for, of course, our own members, but our partners in New York Region Transit for base and really about the operators and awareness so that they can report things that they witness while they're working if they're in that capacity. Our approach combines the hate crime prevention unit within our diversity, equity, inclusion bureau. So that is really a unique established process that we have that really encourages that relationship building with our diverse communities so that they will continue to tell us what's going on and we can monitor that. So that's something we're very, very proud of. It really develops keeping the lines of communications open and allows us to truly enhance the quality of life for members of our community. So we are one of the leading agencies that focus on capturing these incidents. So I'm going to turn it over to Inspector Alexander, who's going to speak to some of our initiatives and strategies that we have within York Regional Police. Colin?
Thank you, Deputy Hammond, and through you, Chairman Emerson. Some of the things that we've been engaged in is the establishment of a annual hate crime conference. We started that in 2020. And we had the pleasure of hosting several services across the province, right here in York Region, gathering to identify trends and from different investigators and recognizing different impacts to those victims and more of a sensitive and accurate response in terms of how we deal with our folks that are exposed to hate crimes. And the other thing is we look to the community and for opportunities to partner and support them. And an example of that is at our safety village, community safety village in Stouffville. And during the summertime, there's the York Region African Canadian Community Alliance there, and they have a mentoring program, a Sankofa program. And throughout the summer, we lend space to them, and that allows them to come and deliver cultural sort of awareness to their community. Our officers engage as well, and that helps to elevate our cultural competence and understanding where they come from in terms of what their needs are and how we can better interact and engage with them. Additionally, we have engaged with our recruiting department in terms of from our area and attending different recruiting drives. And when a recruit comes on, our office, we provide training and bring in awareness to, again, surrounding different cultures, just so that they can understand that we're a very diverse community and region, and then understanding the needs of the community in terms of how we can better serve them, and understanding some of those cultural expectations, some of those differences that they have within our respective community members. I'll just add one more. I think actually Deputy Hammond, you already covered that, so that's it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Colin. And just to conclude, it's really important to say that we are one of the leading agencies that focuses on capturing both hate and hate bias incidents, hate crime and data sets. So this allows us the opportunity for prevention and education before an incident crosses the line of becoming criminal. So we've engaged in a number of initiatives with our partners, the National Hate Crime Task Force, and as I'd already mentioned, the Municipal Diversity and Inclusion Group that's launched their anti-hate campaign. And really, it can't be celebrated enough that we are the first agency to create the Human Rights Education Classroom. And this is really where we provide children and youth with age-appropriate lessons to empower them. So this is really starting from the ground up, and that hopefully it will encourage more reporting, but also get ahead of things before they cross that threshold. So that is the conclusion of this report, and subject to any questions, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank
Chief.
you. Norma?
Okay, so many of the incidents happens in schools. How do we deal with that?
Well, we, as you know, we are still very much partnering with our schools. So there is our Safe Schools protocol. So whenever there is an incident that arises during supervised activities, so the report does speak to the increase during supervised activities and as well as unsupervised. So some of these, it must be said that some of these incidents happen when the school is not open. So that would be like the example of graffiti or something when the school is closed. But during school hours, there is still a process in place where the administration would get in touch with one of our youth education officers or the front line, depending on what it is. So we have to remember, of course, that our youth engagement officers are there for building bridges and forming connections with our kids, not conducting criminal investigations. But if there is an allegation of a criminal investigation, then certainly at the district level, our district criminal investigators will be assigned the investigation and look into it. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a hate crime in terms of something where a charge would be laid. It could be not to minimize it, but it's a racial slur or something to that effect. That's where the Hate Crime Prevention Unit will partner with our youth education people to really try to impress upon those children the hatefulness and the hurtfulness of the language that they're using. So that's an ongoing initiative.
Great. And the charges that have been laid, any results of that? What happens there? I can't recall ever reading a story in the paper or local papers about a hate crime being resolved and what the results are, at least not recently.
Sorry, and I'll just say one quick thing. Yes, I must say that these charges are all criminal offenses, not necessarily specific to hate crime. So we require Attorney General permission to lay a charge as it relates to hate crime specifically, and it factors into sentencing. So to your point, no, there hasn't been in the last couple of years, at least in York Region, a hate crime specific charge that's been successfully prosecuted. Chief?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
And-
you. And
oh,
Chairman, through
sorry.
you. Sorry, Norma, I was going to add to that in relation to charges. So there are, as the deputy mentioned, certain charges that require the consent of the Attorney General. And the majority of those types of charges you might see out and about in the community that the deputy mentioned would fall likely within these categories of willful promotion of hatred or willful promotion of anti-Semitism. They require the consent of the AG to even lay the charge. I'm aware of a large case we've taken downtown to Bay Street in the past several years ago to try and actually have the Attorney General approve that charge. And it was a very good case. It's very difficult to meet that threshold in some cases. And these are areas that need to be worked on with the federal government, provincial government to change some of these laws to make it a little less cumbersome for police agencies in some cases to lay some of these charges, because, you know, as the deputy mentioned, a lot of what goes on in the community, many community members, and rightfully so, are outraged, as are we, but it may not fall to the level of a hate crime or us being able to lay it as a hate crime. So what happens is we lay the criminal offense of mischief or the criminal offense of an assault or something that doesn't have the word hate attached to it in terms of a hate crime. So, and then in some cases, it may not even fall to the level of a crime, and we capture that as a hate incident. we track it all. But we can only deal with what we can appropriately. And in any case where a charge could be laid, we lay those charges.
Norma?
Thanks. And the last question, is there specific areas in York Region that you notice the most incidents?
Thank you, Ms. McCullough. I personally could not answer that question, but perhaps Inspector Alexander, do you have some awareness of that?
Thank you very much, Deputy, and through your chair. Just if you could just repeat or rephrase the question so I could better respond.
Okay, any specific areas in York Region, for example, Georgina, Markham, or areas like that? I'm just curious about how that happens. It seems to happen, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It happens out there. So any areas in particular concentration?
No specific area per se. We obviously look at all of them that happen, all the occurrences that happen. And it depends on, the deputy referred to operating with a global mindset, embracing for local impact. So when something happens outside of our borders, it can have an impact to these occurrences, and depending on where the population is. So if you have the Russian and Ukraine incidents that are happening, then folks that are back here, depending on those areas, you could see an uptake in those specific areas. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's my, and those are my
Anything else,
questions.
Norma? Pardon? Anything else,
Thank you.
Norma?
Those were my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Walter?
Following my earlier inquiries about trends, both within the last year, both the FBI in the United States and Homeland have issued reports that have indicated that the greatest social disruptor in the United States are domestic violence extremist groups that are growing. Those groups in particular have a high degree of correlation with hate crimes. Is there any indication that that is rearing its head here in York Region?
Thank you, Mr. Purcell, through you, Chairman Emerson. There's no indication that we're seeing it based on the statistics right now that's increasing here. The chart indicates that the gender hate crimes have remained constant, so we're not seeing that here. But we are aware of the incident, obviously, that happened in Toronto, where that was an individual that was associated to one of those groups that you're referring to. But again, our purview within hate crime and hate crime prevention, although we monitor global events, it's really in partnership with our intelligence bureau, and they are really heavily invested in staying on top of what's going on globally. But we're monitoring it, but we're not seeing it here in the region.
So there's no current indication of group-based activity in relation to hate crime?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madeline?
Thank you, through you, Chairman. So you talk about youth in schools, and what that brings to my mind is bullying. And in a lot of cases, bullying becomes hate-filled and that sort of thing. So is that trend sort of, when you're talking about what's happening at the schools, and how do we deal with bullying, not just within schools, but on social media, because it does occur after school hours on social media and those kinds of things? Is that something that you're able to address and monitor and deal with? Because I noticed in the business plan draft, you mentioned, like, under the top 5 priorities related to youth, your number 1 was bullying. So I know it's not really hate crime, but in a lot of cases, bullying does become a hate crime. How is that being addressed, or is there a way to address it, or a way to monitor it?
Thank you, Mrs. Goldstein, through you, Mr. Chair. 100%, you're bang on. The bullying is very much a trend that we're seeing. It's always been an issue, but continues to grow. And I think the cyberbullying piece, because that certainly is technology that exists now that we didn't have when we were in schools. So how we address it again is the prevention piece. So that human rights education classroom is affixed to our community safety village. So we run specific programs for kids up into grade 5. that talks about and it's specific education. We have civilian educators that come in and provide some guidance and, about anti-bullying, what that's about. From the reactive position, yes, the bullying, the Safe Schools Act, there is very specific language in there that has a connection with the police, and it's again not criminality, but it's really trying to encourage the reporting of it to get. That's really the crux of it. So
That was
it's the
kind of
youth
the next part
engagement.
of my question is you worked hard to get people to report hate crimes. Is there a push to get people to report bullying? And then what's the reaction to that? Because I mean, who do they report it to? They might report it to the parents or the school principals or leadership there. They're not really going to go to the police because of bullying. So like, how is that something that, I mean, I know it's not really in your purview to come into schools and find out if the principals are dealing with bullying, but in some cases bullying can go way beyond into causes of suicide and that sort of thing. So,
Well, when we had youth engagement officers in the school, there was more opportunity for that connection, that relationship building with the students. But I think it's really, I can't let it be unsaid that we've still have a very strong youth engagement protocol that falls also under me. And we do a lot of networking with the kids outside of the schools because we're not there, but that doesn't mean that we cannot, we go to where they are. Right. And we try to, we invite them to the safety village, but as they get older, they're too old for that. Right. So encouraging that reporting, yes, to the administration at the school, but talk to us. We have a very strong social media campaign that focuses on youth engagement because that's how kids communicate now. And they still have very close connections with our specially trained youth engagement officers.
is there any education that you can be providing to the leaderships of schools on how to deal with bullying and how to respond to it? Because in a lot of cases, they don't know how to respond to bullying, and sometimes they'll just sweep it under the rug, oh, it's just kids being kids, and I mean, is that an approach that's worth, you're talking about teaching the kids and talking to them about reporting and talking to them about not doing it, but how about the leaderships in the schools and how they should be reacting to those kinds of things when they're reported?
Thank you for the question. And we have a very close partnership with the school boards within this region. And we actually meet as a leadership team with them quarterly to speak about a number of things. And this is one of those things. We're very much aligned, the schools and the administrators, the boards, as well as us, and how we want to address this. So that is something that is ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can just, sorry, Chairman, just to add, we work and you may have mentioned it and I may have missed it, but we have a protocol with the schools as well, right? And it's a protocol between the police and both school boards here in the region. And within the protocol, there are mechanisms in there for reporting. And we have, to Cecile's point, we have a great relationship with both directors of the boards. So as much as we're not in the schools anymore, at least specifically in the schools for programming, we do maintain that very good relationship. I mean, I met with the directors of the board, director of the Catholic board just a week ago to talk about a number of things. And this comes up when we do talk. So we do get reported to us on a regular basis, and we just take the same action that we would if we were engaging with the kids directly, right? So.
Okay, thank you. I'm just, because I'm new, I may not know all of the things that you guys are involved in, so it's just trying to educate myself, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask Norma and Madeline to move the recommendation to receive the information. You can see in the report that we're doing a lot. We are, but the crime is still going up. And it is. I got to think though, in the schools, the school boards and the province need to take a little bit more leadership role in this bullying. We can't be there. We have a police force, but there's other ways of starting to help children in the school. And they should be taking a leadership role in that school. They have the capabilities of doing it, but, and you heard the premier at the chief dinner, he could put the police back into schools because he said that's not right. But he'll bypass the school boards, and that's what he needs to do. All those in favor? Against, the motion's carried. Next one, 2023, 2025 draft business plan, chief.
Thank you, Chairman. I will turn it directly over to Superintendent Dawson, my executive officer, and she'll walk you through her and both the manager of strategic services through the draft business plan that we've been waiting so long to bring here. So thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Superintendent
Thank you,
Dawson.
Chief, and through you, Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Steve Pinto, the Manager of Strategic Services here, and it is, we're very pleased to provide the draft 2023-2025 business plan to the board. The plan was developed following an extensive research and consultation process, including consultation with the board here. And it maintains our two foundational pillars of success, being our people and our community. It's organized around four main objectives, being safety and well-being, inclusion and belonging, innovation and continuous improvement, as well as recruitment and retention. Content reflects the core functions of YRP, as well as priorities of members and communities, and it will support all of our stakeholders in understanding our organizational objectives and strategic actions. Following approval of the draft plan today by the Police Services Board, YRP will develop performance indicators related to community policing, community satisfaction, emergency calls for service, violent crime, road safety, information technology, police facilities, and resource planning. Performance measures and activity updates will be reported to the board on an annual basis. So the next steps being that the draft business plan be posted on the Police Service Board website for members of the community to review. We can also put the planning@yrp.ca email there for feedback. And in absence of any substantive changes, we'd like to approve that business plan. The next step after that would be then to notify our stakeholders. And we can do that via a letter with a link to the business plan itself that will be electronic. And it will go to all of our stakeholders, including the 9 municipalities, the region of York, and several other stakeholders that we work with.
Okay, Superintendent Don, thank you. Questions on the 2023-25 business plan? Go ahead, Norma.
So the for 2025, it has not been included in the budget. So what do we do? Do we include that? Of course we have to. Can someone just explain that to me, please?
So the budget that we presented a 4-year budget at the police services last year or this year when we approved the budget for 2023, Norma. There's an outlook to 2025. So I would assume that business plan would include it in that in the forecast. I stand to be corrected, but maybe Jeff can help me, but I assume that's out. Go ahead, sir.
Please.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, to Ms. McCullough. The business plan itself does show NAs along the 2025 row on the advice of financial services. So during the budget process, we did prepare 4-year budgets, Chair, to your point, made submissions to York Region and the timelines and the formats that had been requested. However, we did have problems in the last 2-year outlook. There are risks to the budget that we weren't certain about. And what we did is we brought through the board 1 year of outlook, and we approved 1 year of outlook. And that's why the row in the business plan, because we haven't actually got an approved outlook with York Region, and we're still working through some of those uncertainties working into the 2024 budget process. That's the reason for the NAs.
Yep, but we do have an outlook really tentatively going forward, Norma.
Thank you. That's
Anything else?
satisfactory. Thank you. That's okay.
Good. Any other comments? I'm gonna ask Steve and Mariel to move the recommendation going forward on this one. All those in favor? Against, the motion's carried. I don't believe there's any unfinished business, but there's some other business, a verbal update on Bill C-48, Bail Reform Amendment, hot off the press. Anitra is going to say a few. I should have introduced Anitra. I apologize for doing that. That's I think that most of the board members have got to meet her and great. So thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So this update follows on a letter that the board had submitted to the Prime Minister's office back in February. This past Tuesday, the Minister of Justice had tabled Bill C-48, which proposes amendments to the bail reform provisions in the criminal code. for, for more details on the nature of these provisions, through you, Mr. Chair, I'd suggest the chief be able to provide more detail.
Sure. Chief.
Thank you, Chairman, and through you. First off, I want to thank the board for the letter. Make no mistake about it, the lobbying that has gone on across this province and quite frankly, across the country has had an impact and has got us where we are today. There is still more work to be done. And what I can say, and I know I'm going to turn it over to Jason Fraser, our general counsel, just to walk you through a few of the amendments so you're fully aware of where it is now. There are some changes that we believe are still required. As I step into the role as president of the OACP in June, there is a resolution that will be coming out of the OACP, still lobbying the federal government to make some further changes. So we will work to identify the gaps that we still see, and where there are gaps, we will make sure that that information finds its way into that updated and amended resolution as it shows up in June. So Jason, if you can take it from there.
Thank you, Chief, and through you, Mr. Chair, good afternoon, members of the board. Let me just start by saying that generally speaking, the principle when it comes to bail in Canada is that the onus is on the state to show cause as to why anybody should be detained. And through a Supreme Court of Canada decision called Antic, we have this confirmation that there is a ladder principle within bail, and that for any restriction of somebody's liberties, in general, it's up to the state to satisfy the court as to why there should be that restriction. So the presumption is always with the least restrictive approach. Somebody gets arrested, they get released. And if there's going to be any other deprivation of that person's liberty pre-trial, then the state has to show why that should be, whether it's conditions restricting who they can associate with, curfews, all the way up to ultimately them being detained before trial. But what we do have in the criminal code is that there are circumstances where the onus is reversed, and so that we don't have that ladder principle. In some circumstances, it's up to the accused to show cause as to why they should be released. And a lot of the changes that are being proposed in Bill C-48 is changing some of those circumstances where the onus now shifts on the accused to show cause as to why they should be released. One of those changes is the creation of a new reverse onus for serious repeat violent offenses involving weapons. So if an individual has a previous conviction for a serious violent offense involving a weapon within the previous 5 years, and that offense is subject to potentially a 10-year or greater sentence, and they're currently facing a similar charge, then the onus will shift, and the onus will be on the individual to show cause as to why they should be released. The bill also adds, we already have certain firearms offenses that trigger a reverse onus. The bill would add some additional offenses where there'd be a reverse onus. So that would be unlawful possession of a loaded, prohibited, or restricted firearm, break and enter or robbery for the purpose of stealing a gun, or making an automatic firearm. So those have all been added to the reverse onus provision. It also adds, going back to about 2019, the federal government created a reverse onus provision for individuals who were previously convicted of intimate partner violence offenses. But that only applied to convictions, and what we see is that in many circumstances, the individual is not convicted, but they receive a discharge. A discharge is a finding of guilt, but not a registration of conviction. So if the individual is discharged, then they wouldn't see the reverse onus. That change would happen under this bill. It would add discharges to the list of offenses involving intimate partner violence where there would be a reverse onus. The legislation would also clarify the meaning of prohibition order. Right now, if somebody is on a prohibition order that prohibits them from possessing a firearm or weapon and they commit an offense, then that would trigger the reverse onus. And the clarification shows that it's not just those orders that they get after being convicted, but if an individual is on bail with an order saying that they have no weapons, then that would also trigger the reverse onus. There's also some new considerations and requirements for the court. These ones are more philosophical and guiding, because ultimately the court is independent and the court will make those independent decisions. But at the very least, the court currently has to consider the history of the individual's conviction history, This one isn't really a technical add because they now will have to consider previous convictions, including violence, which is something they now already have to consider, but I guess it's providing certain emphasis. Court also has to state on the record that the court considered both victim safety and security in making their decision with respect to bail, but they also have to consider community safety and security when it comes to the decision with respect to bail. Now, this board and policing partners across the country and the premiers across the country have asked for some additional things. In particular, the OACP and New York Regional Police have asked for some additional things that we haven't quite gotten in this bill. So this bill is a good start, but we still think there's room for advocacy. Certainly in terms of, we were seeking reverse onus for serious violent offenses. We got serious violent offenses involving a weapon, which is important, but there are individuals who will commit serious violent offenses without a weapon that will engage in assault bodily harm or aggravated assault. So it's still the same injury, the same harm. They just use their hands instead of a knife. So we have a difference here in terms of who has the reverse onus. Person with a knife, reverse onus. Person who just beat somebody to a pulp with their hands, not a reverse onus. That's something that we think can still be worked on. We also want to see reverse onus for individuals that engage in chronic intimate partner violence, where the violence is more psychological, where maybe they're not engaging in physical violence, but the harassment that they're engaging in, the coercive control that they're engaging in, vis-a-vis their partner, is having just as devastating effect on the individual from a psychological standpoint as any physical violence ever would. We think those considerations also need to come into play in terms of reverse onus. We've also advocated for some serious firearms bail hearings being put before a provincial court judge instead of a justice of the peace. As it stands now under the criminal code, with the exception of the most serious offenses, your homicides that go before a superior court judge, all bail hearings are going before JPs. And we're saying maybe we need that middle ground. JPs for most offenses, the most serious of offenses going to superior court judges, but for these still very serious firearms offenses, they should go before a provincial court judge. And we would also like to see some explicit reference in the criminal code to say that if there is a reverse onus, then the latter principle doesn't apply. That we don't have to go up the ladder of depriving somebody of their liberty when the onus has been reversed and the onus is on the accused to show causes why they should be released. So we think there's still work to be done, but overall, we're pleased that these amendments that are being proposed in Bill C-48 are taking us in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else, Chief? Questions? It's as clear as I can see, really. Be honest with you, Jason, some of the stuff I have no idea what it's all about, but I'm sure.
I tried, sir.
I know you did a good
I'm
job.
happy to take any questions you may have.
But I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all that, but I mean, I think the last comment you made, it started in the right direction. It's good to go forward. And I know they're wanting more comments, so I'm sure we can provide some more comments to them. So it's good. I think that's what the public wants to hear. It started in the right direction. They need to get something going, and there will be always issues that maybe aren't always covered, but let's see if we can move some of them forward. But well done, sir. It's very well said, but I guess I'm not much of a lawyer, I'll be honest with you. Anyways, any questions? Norma, go ahead, Norma.
Thank you. I'm just giggling a little bit. Sorry about that. Jason, can you speak about geographical boundaries? And then a little more about the prohibition, bail-in prohibition with respect to domestic partner violence. Would there be a time when they can post or include geographical boundaries? So if the person lives here in Richmond Hill, they used to be able to use boundaries so you can ingress or egress, but you can't go there. Can you speak about that a bit?
Jason? That's one of the.
There we go.
There you are.
I'm back. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. On a recognizance of bail, the court can place restrictions in terms of where the individual can go. as you know, Ms. McCullough, the conditions of bail are basically based on primary, secondary, and tertiary grounds. Primary is the individual coming to court. We'll place restrictions to make sure they come to court. Secondary is to make sure that they behave themselves more or less while they're on release, and to ensure that we're putting the conditions in place that are going to impact both victim safety and public safety. And then tertiary is to make sure that the grounds are there so that this whole process isn't going to bring the administration of justice into disrepute. So under the secondary ground, in terms of the protection of both victim safety and public safety, the court can and routinely does place restrictions in terms of, especially when it comes to intimate partner violence, restrictions on that individual being able to go to the home or place of work of the victim, home or place of work of witnesses. Those restrictions are somewhat routine. And sort of as an aside to that, I do know, and I think the chief has spoken of it previously, the enforcement of those measures becomes the key. You can place as many restrictions on somebody as you want, but if you don't enforce them, then they're restrictions without a purpose. And I know that the provincial government is investing additional funds for the enforcement, because as much as it's the federal government that's responsible for creating the laws, it's the province through us that enforces them. And so I know that increased resources are being brought to bear in terms of enforcing those restrictions by police through the specific units that we have to enforce bail conditions.
Thanks. I think I'll leave it there because you've touched on most of the areas already. Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. Anyone else? Okay. And Stephen, thank you. Mario, thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Against, the motion's carried. Before I go into private session, is there any other business at this time brought before the board? I did do very good housekeeping this morning when we started, was a long meeting this morning, but we started a new meeting this afternoon. So the police service, we have Anitra here with me today and with us all, which will be the acting executive director. We also have the acting deputy chief, Kevin Bukowski is here with also today. And outgoing deputy chief is Robertson Roach. Now, this isn't your last meeting, is it? Thought so. I thought so. Yes. Yes. And quite a career, sir. There's I want to do an open session because when we come back out, we will not be in open session. We'll come back. But we want to thank you for your service to York Regional Police over the many years and all you've done to make us that much better. And we're going to miss you. But as I said to you the other day, I think it was maybe yesterday or the day before, said that it's I always like to see people go on to their next stage in life and do what they want to do. And I know you have some plans and do some good things and going forward. And I know you'll still be part of the communities wherever you are. So but we want to thank you and like you say, for all, and even your family and that for letting you allow you to be a deputy chief in York Regional Police and a police officer for all the many years and sleepless nights and the things that you go through. So, sir, once again, thank you on behalf of the board and on behalf of all the residents in York Region. We want to thank you, sir, for your dedication to the service. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's been certainly an honor to serve this community for as long as I have, and I certainly thank the board for its support of me in this capacity, and I thank the police service for its support in me throughout my career. It's been a delightful career. I've worked with some very tremendous people, all of whom I appreciate very much, as I've appreciated all the members of the board, regardless of change. We always seem to have a good relationship. We seem to have good support from the board. So yes, I will miss certain aspects of the job, but I'm certainly looking forward to moving on to that next stage. It's I think we get to the point where we want to say enough, and now I'd like to move on. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. And Chief, you have a few comments too. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to I'll echo your words. And I will say, Robertson, we will have a celebration for Robertson's official retirement, which we'll definitely communicate to the board. But I wanted to say, Robertson, on behalf of your executive command team, the entire organization, you have served the communities of York Region with distinction, passion for policing, and you're just an outstanding individual. And I will say, and a friend. I think I've intersected my career 3 different times with the deputy. When I first started, I had the opportunity to work with him on the same platoon back in 1990. So it's been a tremendous career for him. And then we worked together again as criminal investigators for a period of time. Then I had the luxury of having him right by my side here as a deputy. And I can tell you, I have felt his support, unwavering support, for the past 3 years as a chief, and without Robertson in some occasions right there to pick us up and give us some guidance and advice, we just wouldn't have been as strong a team as we were without you, Robertson. So thank you so much for everything you've done. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And so there is a celebration, and I think you all got copies of that, and hopefully be able to attend. And welcome, Acting Deputy Chief Bukowski. We're looking forward to working with you, and you'll be starting the next one, next board meeting. So that's great. Welcome, sir. And the final one, members of the board, there is a recruitment on Wednesday, I believe this coming Wednesday. I think that's right. Coming this
Next Thursday.
next Thursday? Sorry, next Thursday. I'm out of town, out of the country, so I'm hoping Mayor Pellegrini will be there to bring greetings on behalf of the board. I think it's next Thursday. I thought it was Wednesday, but you sure it's? Good. Okay, hopefully some of the board members be able to attend. And it's over at the theater, if I remember right, at the Newmarket Theater. So it's good, good to know. So hopefully some board members can show up. It's in the afternoon. Yes, Linda? Yes? You're coming? Good, that's what I thought. Good. The old town hall in Newmarket. Yeah, downtown, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah, get there early because there's no parking. But anyways, that's. But if you do go, you get a ticket. You can ask the chief to look after. Anyways, I'm gonna get Linda and Alan to move us in the camera at this time. Okay, since there's no other business, all those in favor? Yes, the motion is carried. Thank you. And